In the late 90s, there was this strange occurrence happening in Japan. There would be multiple reports of children who had seemingly taken their own life. Now, throughout these cases, there would remain one constant variable: that this mass event had happened just right after the first Pokemon game was released on February 27th, 1996. Now, the first game was split into two different editions, that being Pokemon Red or Pokemon Green. And during this phenomenon, there wouldn't only be reportings of children who had seemingly taken their own life, but it was also reported that people would experience immense hallucinations or headaches. Now, did this phenomenon really happen, or was it just some twisted internet rumor? Well, maybe you're going to be surprised by this one, but it was the latter. This was just some internet creepypasta, and today we'll take like a miniature deep dive into finding out what exactly was the Lavender Town Syndrome. In the original Pokemon games, Pokemon Red and Green, the player would encounter Lavender Town. In this town, you would find a graveyard for Pokemon and witness several ghost sightings while exploring the town. Already pretty deep for what is apparently a game for younger audiences. However, there was something off about this town, other than the unsettling presence of ghosts and dead Pokemon: the music. When the player would enter Lavender Town, they would be greeted with a high-pitched beeping soundtrack. This track sounds ominous, almost like something is going to creep up on you at any moment. And according to the famous internet legend, upon hearing this track, it would drive younger children to the act of taking their own life, and would possibly affect older fans of the game, giving them either an immense headache or to experience hallucinations. This soundtrack would be the catalyst for what is known as the Lavender Town Syndrome. The notes that were hidden in the soundtrack were said to have only harmed kids around the ages of 7 to 12, and would possibly harm older fans of the game. And when younger kids had heard this, they would be induced with terrible headaches, nausea, hallucinations, and thoughts of taking their own life. According to the internet legend, around 200 children would pass away upon hearing the soundtrack, and it would either be from hanging or jumping off of tall heights. And there was one post regarding Lavender Town Syndrome that would be posted in 2010. Here, a user had used a special software to analyze the audio waves of the soundtrack, and once inspected, the software would produce images of several of the Pokemon known as unknown. And the interesting thing about the unknown Pokemon is that basically they're like hieroglyphs, and you can make words out of specific sets of unknown Pokemon. And the photos that were produced by the software to analyze the soundtrack would translate into "leave now." But there was something off about this post. Pokemon Red and Green was released all the way back in 1996, and the Pokemon's unknown didn't come into existence until 1999. Just 3 years later, many believers of this internet urban legend would begin to grow suspicious of this disturbing case. So when exactly did mentions of the Lavender Town Syndrome start? Well, there is no one specific post that started this fire. However, posts would begin to circulate in 2010. How could a case such as the Lavender Town Syndrome, that had supposedly started in 1996, right after the game's release, only be mentioned a decade later? And if you were to search up anything about mass people unaliving themselves due to Lavender Town's soundtrack between 1996 and 2010, no reputable sources would show up. The earliest mention I could ever find of the Lavender Town Syndrome existing was surprisingly from a Sonic forum website, Sonic Sat AM Forum, and here, the original poster had posted about an article, and this post included no link and basically just copy and pasted this supposed article, making this whole entire Lavender Town phenomenon even less plausible. And a segment from this article that was posted onto the forum would read: the predominant symptoms related to what would become known as the Lavender Town tune included headaches and migraines, bleeding from eyes and ears, mood swings and irritability, addiction to the games, unprovoked violence, withdrawal and unresponsiveness, and in approximately 67% of the cases, tendencies. However, these symptoms only manifested in children between the ages of 7 and 12 years old who had reached the area in the game known as Lavender Town, most of whom were revealed to have been wearing headphones or earphones while playing the game. As it turns out, the developers of the Lavender Town area had sought to make an area that would leave an impression on the player. According to a member of the development team, he claimed that at the time of development, a number of the team were interested in making Lavender Town Town, a little different to the rest of the game. The Pokemon Tower is a visible result of that. Games Division magazine, in an interview earlier this year, that and the fact that the Lavender Town is so different from all the other cities in the game. It is smaller, it has fewer people occupying it, it didn't even have a gym, and of course, the music was very, very eerie. In fact, the first version of the game, we were told to slightly change the song played in the background of Lavender Town because our manager told us it would make children upset. The music used in subsequent versions is different. Either the member of the development team was unaware of the full impact of the Lavender Town tone, or was vastly under-exaggerating how upset children would get. No more is said of the music in the article, but there are mentions of Lavender Town's other macabre features. What the member of the development team failed to disclose to Games Dimensions magazine was that the music used in the first wave release of Pokémon Monsters Red and Green was formulated out of an experiment in binaural beats using slightly different frequencies of sound, each frequency played in one ear through earphones or headphones. Various psychological effects can be induced upon the listener. In most versions of the first wave releases, this resulted in the player feeling uneasy, apprehensive, and mildly disturbed. However, for upwards of 200 children, it provoked a variety of disturbances in the brain that went undetected purely because it was undetectable by fully developed human ears. Instead, only children fell victims to the tones, resulting in psychological and physiological problems that in some cases led to death, many of which were unalivings. At the time when this was posted, which was on April 29th, 2010, I can kinda see how this was somehow plausible, as on the surface level there seems to be a lot of detail included, but keep in mind that the Lavender Town Syndrome phenomenon had supposedly started in 1996, so why was this post released all the way in 2010? Posts like this would be one of the many that would spark people's interest into the Lavender Town Syndrome. People would begin feeding into the rumor that was started by Lavender Town by making posts where they would say that listening to the soundtrack had given them immense headaches or thoughts of game ending themselves. But this was merely just word of the mouth without any actual evidence. There would be several videos posted on YouTube around that time with the Lavender Town soundtrack playing while showing some disturbing fan art of Pokemon. Now we could sort of see that these videos are purely made for shock and horror. There would never be any actual source posted online that had said that the soundtrack would ever cause the death of someone. If there was any actual credible sources of this happening, it would surely be posted, but no matter how deep I dived into the internet, no reputable sources would ever show up. However, this wouldn't be a true Lavender Town deep dive without mentioning the famous epileptic attacks that was caused by an episode of Pokemon Electric Soldier Porygon. In this episode, released on December 16th, 1997, Ash and friends would be teleported inside a computer. I won't get too much into it, but they would be helped by the world's first digital Pokemon, Porygon. But the main antagonist of the series, Team Rocket, would also have their own Porygon. But the main spectacle of this episode would occur when Pikachu would hit a missile with his Thunderbolt attack and cause this immense explosion of lights and colorful flashes to be shown on screen. This scene was only 5 seconds and would contribute to nearly over 100 children getting full-blown seizures and being admitted to the hospital. The main reason I'm bringing up this now banned episode is that it aired in 1997 and had plenty of credible sources, such as articles being published by CNN and the New York Times covering this event. While the Lavender Town phenomenon was said to have started in 1996 and has no credible sources other than people posting it on several forum websites. This begs the question, if this occurrence really did happen, why was there no news outlets covering it, like the CNN and the New York Times had covered the banned episode of Pokemon? But at the end of the day, the Lavender Town Syndrome is just another internet urban legend made to turn something from your childhood into something disturbing, like how Sonic EXE exists or Ben Drowned exists. This was just another symptom of the creepypasta craze that had started around 2010. And to prove that the Lavender Town Syndrome is just a myth, I will be showing a recording of me listening to Lavender Town for like 30 minutes and nothing's going to happen. I mean, I'm 22 now, and according to the myth, it only affects young children. But I do remember being 10 or 12 when I had first listened to the Lavender Town tune, and still at that time, it had no negative effects on me, leaving the strange internet phenomenon debunked. Okay, just to prove everything about the Lavender Town Syndrome song, here's me listening to it. Okay, that didn't do anything. Okay guys, that concludes today's episode of Internet Urban Legends being debunked. And this should always go without saying, but if you see something on the internet and it seems like it has some sort of deadly presence or deadly influence on something, you probably shouldn't believe it. And with that being said, this has been Stalkeen, and I'll see you all later.